Hello and welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top local, national, and world stories from a religious, moral, and ethical point of view. I'm Sean Kalin with the WHS Crusade for Children. I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Dr. John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist Church. Reverend Sally McLean, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Father Tony Smith, Archdiocese of Louisville. And Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Mountain School. We begin this week with the shooting of 2 Louisville police officers, and that coming off a recent weekend when we had 5 shootings on one Sunday alone.
While officers arrested 19-year-old Jeremiah Thompson, police say he fired a gun as they held the suspected car thief to the ground. 1 bullet hit the suspect's chest and 2 officers. Here on the left, Officer Laxman Acharya took a bullet to the left leg near the knee. On the right, Officer Brendan Kerner required surgery for the gunshot wound on his right hand.
They are doing well. Officer Laxman has been released from the hospital last night, and Officer Kerner went through surgery just a couple of hours ago for the injuries that he sustained to his hand. And we hope that he is released from the hospital shortly. Very, very proud of these officers. There's another officer that was out there with them doing proactive work. That's exactly what this community needs.
Louisville comes off a weekend of 5 shootings, the Wyandotte and another in the West End being fatal. The mayor Monday pointing to judges when asked about the violence.
There needs to be a punishment. There needs to be a consequence for that action. And it also hopefully serves as a deterrent for others. And so continuing to ensure that our judiciary is doing its job once police arrest individuals who are committing violent crimes, I think is critically important as well.
So you heard the mayor there pointing to judges when asked about the violence, and there's been a lot of discussion lately, a lot of discussion on this radio station, WHS Radio, but for the calls for judges to enforce consequences for action. And I turn it over to you all for your thoughts on this.
Well, judges are elected officials. I mean, we're getting what who we vote into office. The mayor, I'm sure he knows that, but his comments didn't create an awareness of that. I mean, if we want to have judges operate in a certain way, under the law, of course, then we need to elect judges who will do that.
True. I mean, if they're elected to do if they do what they're elected to do. But now we're talking, I presume, not about federal judges, those who are
these
appointed.
local
Judges,
yeah.
right? But they have to. It sounds terrible to say, but I would presume that they do what they're elected to do. But what does the law allow? Most of us sitting around this table don't know what the law allows in these situations. For the mayor to say there should be consequences, what consequences? That's up to the judge and to the jury or whatever, however it rolls out. But I would say 2 things to keep in mind. Number 1 is sometimes, unfortunately, the judges who may be up for re-election or so, this plays into stand. Number 2, what impact does it have on the community? Is the community allowing themselves, or are they amenable to increasing tax bases, perhaps, for jails, for holding these guys, whatever it is, rehabilitation, whatever it might be? It's not just a matter of saying it's not like a black or white issue. He does this, you get that. That's not how our justice system works, by the way. So, but I would say that let's see what happens. And what I would suggest to the mayor, Mr. Mayor, and whatever, is also look at what his offices may be able to do to help out with the judicial system. So.
And the punishment should fit the crime.
Yes.
I mean, it shouldn't be an overreach for something that doesn't require that much. Right. So just to say, well, we're going to build new prisons. We have enough people in prisons right now, in jails right now. I don't think we need more of that. I think what bothers me is, are we looking at the symptom and not the root cause of what the problem is? What is the root cause that's creating, 7 shootings in 2 weeks? So there's got to be something more to this story than just arrest and punishment. What's underneath all this? Because I love Louisville. I think Louisville's a great city. And living in Shelby County, I hear all sorts of, but I do love Louisville. I think it's, but I hear all sorts of things about how horrible Louisville is now. And that really bothers me because I really like the city.
Just don't live here.
My home is in Shelbyville. It's been in Shelbyville for a long time.
No,
But
no,
I've always worked in Louisville.
Yeah.
When we have the campaigns for judges, I always go on the website called, I believe it's Citizens for Better Judges. Several community organizations have people on this committee, and they interview the candidates, and we can see side by side where each candidate stands, and that gives me an impetus of who to vote for. I think that one of the root problems now is the Louisville police force is understaffed horribly and therefore overworked horribly. I think, what are we? We're down something like 200 officers.
Right.
I mean, that's a recipe for disaster, which is happening.
Right. And I would concur with that. We do need more police officers, but I would also offer the caution that having an overabundance of policemen is not going to be able to solution either.
Well, they have to be trained, but you know, I have a lot of faith in the police chief now. He seems to be saying all of the right things and doing the right things. So.
I'm sorry, Sally. I was intrigued by Mayor Greenberg's statement. This is the moral side of the news, and he made a moral statement. Actions deserve appropriate consequences, and people need to be held accountable.
Yes.
From a moral perspective, legal perspective, that should all meld together. Judges are certainly a part of that. Police are. The mayor is. So we need some direction from our political leaders.
And I think the police, I mean, where it's really coming from too is they've been very vocal lately about saying these are repeat criminals that most of them were violent criminals.
Not necessarily in these instances.
Not in these
but,
instances, but especially not in the one where the police officers were shot. But these are violent criminals that we're seeing them right back on the street the next day or the day after that, and the police are really being much more vocal about that as well.
So we're just passing them through the system and letting them stay on the streets.
Yep.
And maybe the system is what needs to be corrected. You know, you're looking for guidance. Again, even on the level of judges and mayors and pastors and whatever, comes with there's a responsibility for our choice of life and choice of action, or our call, however you want to say that.
And not to disagree with you, a system needs perfecting, needs tweaking, whatever we want to fixing. It's hard to hold a system responsible, though.
Exactly.
And I will say Mayor Greenberg at least was trying to identify part of the problem and some of the people involved. But it's a whole mix of individuals and community leaders that need to be involved.
Very good. Thanks for watching and listening on WHS Radio and WHS Television. We turn now to the escalation in the war between Russia and Ukraine. The U.S. allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles. Reports today, as of Thursday, of Russia responding with the use of an ICBM and now threatening the U.S. base in Poland.
This morning, a criminal investigation has now been opened into the severing of 2 fiber optic cables at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, cables vital for data transfer between some European nations, which are this morning calling this an act of sabotage against Ukraine's Western allies. No one has directly accused Russia, but foreign ministers, including those from Germany, Poland, and the UK, saying Moscow's escalating hybrid activities against NATO and EU countries, which they called unprecedented in scale and variety, are creating significant security risks. Moscow has denied they had any involvement, but a Danish military ship is right now tracking a Chinese-flagged vessel in the Baltic Sea they suspect may be linked to Russia and this suspected sabotage. Robin?
Thank you, Martha. And as you know, that controversy coming amid breaking news overnight in the war in Ukraine. Ukraine making accusations that Russia might have used an intercontinental ballistic missile. Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, is in Kyiv for us this morning. Good morning to you, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, Robin. That's right. Overnight, multiple strikes by Russia on the eastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro, and the situation is rather confused. The big question, what was it? Ukraine initially saying it was an ICBM strike, and President Zelensky just reinforcing that in the last few minutes, but they're still assessing. ICBMs have never been used in combat before and are nuclear capable, but this wasn't a nuclear strike, and a Western official also saying they didn't think it was an ICBM, but many agreeing that they haven't seen a strike like this before. The Kremlin refusing to comment, but of course the attack comes in the wake of Ukraine firing American ballistic missiles and the US embassy here closing yesterday amid fears about a potential Russian attack. And we're also hearing that North Korean generals and high-ranking officers were present at the site of yesterday's strike using British cruise missiles into Russia. I mean, frankly, it's been a week of escalations. All of this is going to be a huge challenge for President-elect Trump and his plans to try and end Russia's war here in Ukraine.
So your thoughts, the Ukraine launching long-range U.S. missiles into Russia, creating more chaos? How do we see this playing out? And is this forcing Trump's hand in a certain way when he comes into office in 2 months?
I think there are real apprehensions here on with what will happen after the 20th of January next year, because we have our NATO allies who are extremely nervous about what the new administration will or will not do. And so it seems like they're revving up the conflict now. The Ukrainians are against the Russians because they don't know where they will be on the 21st of January. And especially with the Russians now employing the North Koreans, this is flat out terrifying, because these people are totally opposed to the United States of America. Of course, Ukraine. They're just proxies, fighting proxies in Ukraine, but they are totally opposed to the United States of America. They have made threats in the past against us, and the whole world is a rather frightening question mark.
When I think of the situation, I'm reminded what's the philosopher Santayana, those who do not know their history, paraphrase it, are bound to repeat it. And I'm seeing, again, people argue with me that this is not the case, but looking at what is happening now in Europe and the world, and what happened in the 30s, I'm seeing a major coordination, very similar. But what gets me, what I would caution about it, whatever elect Trump does when he becomes president, I'm just reminded again of the whole thing of appeasement. This is, people in the 30s kept saying, well, Adolf will, if we just give him this or give him that, he's taking a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and he kept saying, this will be it, and he obviously lying through his teeth or whatever, which resulted in World War II. But we're seeing something similar. I would take this, they took the Crimean, whatever, take this. And it's already been reporting that anything on the table, that Russia is saying that they have to keep what they've conquered already type thing. And Poland's worried about being attacked, other NATO traditions. So is this a form of appeasement? And even whatever President Trump does, I don't know. But if we don't stand up for what's someone aggressor doing this, we are basically appeaser, and we're heading down that same road that we went down in the 30s. My father fought in World War II, so that's my concern.
Well, we're 2 months though out from roughly from January 20th.
Right.
So there's 2 months of not what will President Trump do, but what will President Biden do.
Correct.
And he seems to be willing to expand the uses of U.S.-provided weaponry. There's been some speculation that he's trying to set up a situation that will create difficulty for President Trump to deal with. I don't, who can read President Biden's mind? It already is an international conflict. Russia has called on North Korea in a treaty similar to a NATO treaty to supply some troops, some units to help in the Ukrainian war. Very concerning. We've got 2 more months left for President Biden to address this issue. Could it be that is it President Putin is seeing this as a 2-month window that he has to accomplish his goals in Ukraine? Very concerning, Stan. I agree with you.
But if that's the case, then what Biden is doing is trying to stop that and stop anything from being further escalated. Although it appears that it's escalating, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's trying to put an end to something that's already.
What President Biden did result in the escalation of it. So Russia has now said that they will assume that if American weapons are used, then America is involved.
But the Russia's been saying that, the whole rhetoric routine.
But there was they had a new document come out a few days ago, a new policy stance that said they would.
That's right.
And the policy stance, if memory serves me, involves
nukes.
Nukes.
Right.
I mean, the nuclear threat. We haven't really dealt with that in half a century for more or less, and it is still as cataclysmic as it was in 1945.
Right.
So we've got 2 fronts. We've got the one that's Ukraine and Russia. We've got the Israel-Palestinian thing. Either one could escalate into full-blown war. So which do you see is the more serious of the conflict, or is there a discretion to be made between the 2?
I see a loss of human life
Either way.
equally serious, whether it happens in the Middle East, Ukraine, or wherever that I cannot imagine this planet without war, and it's
Depressing.
yeah.
You mentioned the whole thing of President Biden causing the issue, but it has been said that one of the reasons he did this is because of the escalation of the missiles and strikes from Russia into Ukraine, plus the straw that broke the camel's back was the North Koreans coming in.
Sure.
This is a response to that.
Yeah.
So even if that's the case, I don't like it, but I agree with you, John, on that. It's escalating more, but my concern is if we don't respond to it in some form or fashion, then are we not that whole walk appeasing type thing?
Well, that's a good point. I would say, though, that in war, if we play for a tie, we're going to lose.
Right.
We learned that in Vietnam. Yeah. If we play just to, well, I'll escalate it here. If we don't play to win, that's a poor choice of words. If we don't fight a war to win it, we're going to lose it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Ukraine has moved into Russian territory.
Sure.
As many people think okay, this is where we're going to have a treaty to end this war.
As a bargaining chip.
As a bargaining chip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's
interesting too, as I understand it, Russia put out a statement in regards to the missiles that they wiped out all of 9 of them. Didn't hurt anything, but the U.S. and the Allies have said no. They got a couple, but they took out ammo dumps where the North Koreans were staying, whatever. So.
And the British were firing their missiles,
Mm-hmm.
their long
Exactly.
cruise missiles as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the loss of soldiers with Russia? That's going to be made up with Korean soldiers? So that's the way that's going to work?
There are only 10,000, 20,000 Korean soldiers. It's not a huge number.
Well, but
it's,
and Russian KIA, the last number I saw, was approaching 1 million.
Yeah.
So they're, they all didn't happen in one battle over the series. 10,000, 20,000 North Koreans would help on the ground for the next 2 months.
Yeah. And one of the concerns, again, that I have as well, you talk about the Russian death rate, whatever, but there's reports, at least in the media and whatever, being put out that President Vladimir Putin, is really on the edge. Mm-hmm. That there's a possibility of you talk of the military going against him or whatever. If is there truth to anything of that nature? This is not a Stalin or someone like that who has absolute control. This is somebody who has control of perhaps nuclear weapons or whatever, but he can get to a point where all of a sudden something happens, and then we do have World War III. So,
Does the Russian public realize the number of people, of troops killed in action? Because I think that I've got to think that if they knew those numbers, that the Putin government would experience basically the same thing that the Tsarist government was experienced in World War I, which toppled the Tsar from leadership in Russia.
And hadn't we heard over a year ago that the Russian public was already upset with the number of deaths that occurred? And so weren't they taking them out of prisons or something, the soldiers?
Yes.
Didn't I hear that? Okay.
and we're hearing also that President Putin has basically cut the pay rate for the military, whatever, and especially those who are wounded coming home. They have, I mean, he's taken away their medical benefits. This is not going to endear him to the Republic.
No.
People.
Oh.
Well, and we're all struggling together, maybe from different perspectives, but coming up with no solution. What is the moral solution here? Is it to go full bore and try to win this thing quickly? Is it to step back and appease? What
Don't go
do
to
we
war
do?
in the first place.
Yeah.
Well, tell President Biden on
Isn't
this
the
one.
ultimate moral solution for one country not to attack another country?
Yeah, I think that would be a good solution.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, good guys don't do that. The bad guys tend to do that.
And of course, we have President-elect Trump saying he's going to end this on day one.
I think he will.
What if that's the solution?
He'll give Putin what he wants.
Yeah, we'll see.
This will develop in an interesting way, and the next 2 months, I think, are key for Russian responses.
We'll see.
I just pray to God that they don't push the wrong button.
Yes.
I heard recently too, which I didn't want to hear it, but I understand the German authorities have said to Putin, anything about NATO, we're not the little, remember what happened in World War II.
Right.
I think so. If they get their heads up in the air, that could give Putin another edge in Russia. Man, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
All right, well, let's move on closer to home. It's Thanksgiving week. We're very thankful for our Louisville Firefighters who had an amazing rescue of a construction worker last week.
They dug down probably 6 to 8 inches before they came to that hard hat. Now they know where he is.
This drone picture provided by Deputy Mayor David James shows the head of the trapped construction worker still wearing his helmet. The hard hat signaled to Louisville Fire where to find the worker. He had fallen nearly 12 feet into a space, completely buried, but with space to breathe.
There's so much weight pushing in, but there was enough debris around. He was just very fortunate that it wasn't crushing his chest and his lungs at the time.
Then the rescue at 8:26 last night, and now new details emerge about the reality.
Eventually, his cell phone, which also didn't break, got out of his pocket. He was able to call his family. We've seen trench rescues where a person is only buried up to their waist, and it's still fatal. And here you had a person completely buried, and yet they were able to be successful. So you can never take anything for granted.
The community holding their breath. The chief saying a successful rescue could never be certain.
This is about as bad as it can get for a trench collapse, confined space rescue.
But a response with the fire crew that he will certainly remember.
If I'm looking back to this, sitting on my rocking chair, hopefully sipping a good Kentucky bourbon, we just wanted to have that tremendous pride that I was fortunate enough to serve alongside the men and women of the Louisville Fire Department.
Just amazing video there with the everything surrounding him, to think that he's able to breathe. Your thoughts on that?
May God bless and protect all of our first responders.
Amen.
We should be thankful for them.
We can agree, Stan.
I mean, especially after last week between the plant explosion and this, they were on there, they did their best, and lives were saved.
Yeah.
And wasn't it the firefighters that started the Crusade for Children?
The
different
certainly
ones
involved,
that-
PRP in
Right.
1956.
So we have a special fondness for
yes.
firefighters anyway, since we're on the moral side.
They're the best.
And it's kind of amazing that they could, A, that he lived, and B, that they were able to rescue him.
He certainly has a story to tell his children.
He will have a great story to tell. You know, living in the country on a farm, it was always dangerous for somebody working on a silo.
Yes.
That if they fell into the grain, of course, they would suffocate. But this story has such a good ending.
I wonder how many sermons this story will be used as an illustration or something, because there's a lot.
May they be many.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, well, we have a couple minutes left. Let's talk about the rudeness of Louisville.
Louisville's a good city.
Louisville, your favorite city, Louisville, Sally. I'm just
The
joking.
rudeness?
Yes, so there's a report out of the New York Post that said Louisville residents are among the rudest in the nation.
Yeah, we're number 4.
The survey ranked Miami, Florida as having the most impolite population. So Miami, then Philadelphia, Tampa, Louisville was ranked 4th.
And this is coming from New York.
Yeah, obviously they don't ride the subway very much in New York.
Yeah.
Well, then why are so many people retiring in Kentucky? Because that seems, maybe it's only in Shelby County that they're moving, and not into Jefferson County, but there are a lot of retirees that are coming to Kentucky. And it has something to do with the value of the property, so they can get their homes a lot less expensive. But I've not experienced Louisvillians to be rude, except for the ones maybe sitting on my right.
Well, thank you. And I feel the same way about those ones sitting on my left after that comment.
I've lived in 13 states from West Coast to East Coast, and almost every state I've been in, you have your rude people and you have your good people. But I find Louisville in Kentucky very attractive in regards to transportation and driving, especially, you know, the mad.
Well, except for the out-of-state drivers, you know.
That's not true.
Sean, with all due respect, I think this is a slow news day nonsense article.
Fake news.
Too much time on their hands.
Fake news.
The least rude city was Peyton Manning's favorite city, Omaha, Nebraska.
Well, actually,
Also
I've been
Warren
through
Buffett.
Omaha.
They have cars
One
in
of the
Omaha?
most confusing cities to drive in.
Well, that's why they're nice.
Yeah, they're always go this way, go that.
Trying to tell people.
I would disagree. I think we all would. This is
even if it's true, that gives us something to work for.
That's right.
yeah. Number 5.
Well, hey, and be thankful we're not the most rude. Right?
Well, look at this. 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, we were the city of compassion.
Yes.
Now all of a sudden,
We're rude.
We're not. We're rude.
Yeah.
What happens, Dan?
I don't know.
What happened in the course of a few years?
All right. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks to our panelists this week. We've got John Slider, retired pastor, Free Methodist, Reverend Sally McLean, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Father Tony Smith, the Archdiocese of Louisville and St. Patrick Catholic Church, and Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Mountain School. Join us this Thursday, Thanksgiving Day at 5:30 for a special WHS Crusade for Children Building the Future endowment special. You'll love it. It's producer Phil Dunaway is with us. He put it together. It's a great show. So have a great week. Have a great Thanksgiving. And thanks again to our panel. We'll see you again next week on Moral Side of the News.